Yo, CTR Captain Tech Review with my brand new comparison video of the LG Watch Sport and the Samsung Gear S3. So before I begin in diving into both of these smartwatches, a quick shout out to my Captain brother from another mother, Captain Savage. Thank you, Captain Savage, for letting me borrow your Samsung Gear S3. Much appreciated for the purpose of this doing this video. So a little Captain salute for you. Boom. Thank you, Captain Savage. Without further ado, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk first. I'm going to talk about the differences between these two watches. I'm not going to get into too many details of how the OS works, one to another, and pretty much like that. They're very similar in how they operate and stuff like that. So I want to talk about basically the differences on and some information on basically what you might be looking for that could affect your decision on buying one or another. So some of the caveats you might run into with one OS versus the other, the hardware differences as it relates to battery life. So I'm going to quickly cover the hardware difference and a little bit of detail on the hardware differences between these two, the two major differences. And we're going to talk about the OS level, the OS, the operating system that each one runs. And of course, the most important thing, battery life. Well, we're going to talk about the differences between these two. And once again, the hardware differences between these two watches does have an impact on battery life with each of these devices. More on that later. So let's talk about comfort. How are these watches to wear all day? Well, here's the best way I can describe it. The LG watch is like a shoe. The Samsung watch is like a sneaker. So a quick look at the Samsung watch here. Why I think is more comfortable than the LG. Well, in terms of a sneaker versus a shoe, you have a softer band, silicone rubber, nice and soft on the skin. The bottom of the watch is flat, so it has no pressure point really on your wrist, so it sits nice and level and flat on your wrist, no problem. Here's a little video of how the Samsung watch looks on my wrist, how it sits. You can obviously it's not as thick as the LG, but I don't think that's a big deal. More on that. Then we have the LG, which is like a nice shoe, a comfortable shoe. Why is it a shoe? Well, you have the band is stiffer material, polyurethane, which is a little stiffer. Still comfortable to wear. I haven't had any problems with it. Unfortunately, you can't change the band on this. You can change the bands on, as you saw with the Samsung 22 millimeter band. You can pop it on there. You want leather, go leather, rubber, any different color, whatever you want to do. This, you kind of stuck with it. That is a deal breaker for a lot of people. To be honest with you, I'm not crazy about it myself. But with that said, there are some other pros for this device that help me kind of overlook the whole band thing. And what these materials are made out of, this is pretty tough. So hopefully I hope this will last longer than the watch. Hopefully we'll see. With that said, here's a clip of how the LG watch looks on my wrist, how it presents itself. And here's another clip of the two watches together. And you can see the size of the watch face of the Samsung is actually bigger than the LG. Not as thick. And I think people are overblowing the thickness of the watch. There are watches that are much bigger and thicker than these. For example, the Garmin Chronos is actually bigger and thicker than the LG watch. Mind you, that's a super duper activity tracker watch, but it is bigger. Here's an old school Casio watch that I used to rock when I was a young captain, or a private at the time. Call it that, and I got this for my 12th birthday 11 years ago. Now, this isn't as thick as the LG, but look at this thing. This is big. This is old. Got a big ass barometer on this thing, you know. This is the watch back in the day. You could do altitude and weather pressure. Well, of course, not all these watches do that crap now, but this is out of reference. Anyone who's worn a watch for a long time, like myself, watches like this isn't a big deal size-wise. It's not. And I want to add this: not at any point during the time I was wearing this watch did I ever hear, "Oh my God, look at the size of that thing." No, I'm talking about the watch here, people, okay? Nothing else, just the watch as it relates to that phrase. So not once did I ever have that problem. Actually, I got a few compliments on how nice the actually watch looked. I don't mind the look of the watch at all. I actually like the look of the S3 a little better, a little more my taste, a little more manly watch compared to the LG. But the LG I think is still nice. I like it. Whether you like it or not, that's your opinion. That's fine. You don't have to like everything. But I like the look of this watch a little better, a little more my style. But regardless, I do like the look of the watch, LG watch as well. Just prefer that one. So I mean, yeah, I can go over more, but I mean, pretty much I have done a video. You have the rotating crown, and is the crown any better than the bezel? Well, I don't. I think about the same. They both do what they're intended to do, and they both work very well. Samsung is a little clicky. You hear that? A little clicky noise. So it has a nice little feedback to it. You know that you're actually hitting the next thing when it clicks, which is fine. Basically, that's the difference I think for comfort and the aesthetics. The crown versus the bezel. 6 of one, half dozen other. It's up to your preference. So, without further ado, let's talk about some hardware. All right, we're gonna start with the LG hardware-wise. So LG, talk about basically a couple things I want to take note. I'm not going to go over all the sensors. I can put the description of each thing, of each device in my description below. But the major things we'll go over, we'll have, CPU, you get a Snapdragon 2100 quad-core CPU. That's important to note. It is 1.1 gigahertz. I believe the Samsung is 1.0 gigahertz. It's not really worth mentioning the difference between those two, especially for a watch. But difference quad-core on the LG, important to note. The memory, 768 megabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of storage, 2.4 gig is usable, the rest is used by the OS. We have a 430 milliamp hour battery, and the screen on the LG has a pixel density of 348 pixels per inch. So it's a very high-res screen. I think it's the highest res screen thus far on a watch. I don't think anything is any higher than that. It is very crisp, very clear, and it's very easy to read, look at in the daytime. Here's a little snapshot of I took earlier today, doing my driveway adventure, tracking my activity for the purpose of this video. And as you saw in the clip, it's fairly easy to read in the daytime. Now for the Samsung, I'll talk about the radios in a minute. But for the Samsung, you have the Exynos 7270 dual-core processor, same memory, 768 megabytes of RAM, 4 gig of storage, 380 milliamp hour battery, and a pixel screen density of 278 pixels per inch. So is that a huge deal? Well, looking at them two side by side, it's hard to tell, but the LG is a little bit sharper. With the higher res screen, it will be a little difference in sharpness. Not a huge difference, as you can probably tell, just by looking at the screens here, but a little. There's a difference on the lens. I don't think it's that big of a deal, really. Both screens are very nice. The Samsung is a brighter screen, so it is easier to look at this during the daytime. And here's a little screenshot of the Samsung during the daytime on my little driveway adventure. And I have a quarter-mile long driveway, so when I go down the driveway, it's an adventure. So with that said, those are the, in my opinion, the big major differences. They basically have the same sensors. This has a proximity sensor, so it knows when it's on your wrist. This may or may not have that as well. I don't remember, but I'll have that in the description below. So forgive me if I don't have the information right now. But for that, the big difference, the little bit difference in screen, which will have an impact on battery life, not really that big of a deal. The bigger one is the CPU, right? The Exynos dual core versus the Snapdragon quad core. Now, besides the number of cores, there is also a difference in how the chip is made. So the Snapdragon uses a 28 nanometer size die it prints the CPU on. This guy has a 14 nanometer size die. So why is that important? Well, when Xenos shrunk this down from 28 to 14, it gained roughly like 20 to 30, between 20 and 30% battery efficiency. So it uses less power on a smaller die, and also creates less heat as well. Not that that's a big deal in the watch. The Snapdragon is a 28 nanometer. Why they use that die size on a watch, I don't know. They have a smaller one in the phone. Whatever. 821 uses the 14 nanometer. And this is using 28. Why would you use the bigger form factor in the watch? It doesn't make any sense. But regardless, that actually has an impact on how much power the CPU uses. So not only does it have 2 more cores to power, but you also have a bigger die size, which also impacts the battery efficiency. So I wanted to talk about that in hardware differences. Of course, you got the crown. We kind of talked about that, the bezel versus the bezel. Now the other thing I want to mention is this does have the LTE radio. This version is the Bluetooth Wi-Fi only version. I didn't have a LTE version of the S3 available to really have a comparison test on how well each one works. As far as I can tell, they both work equally as well. And one thing I want to say about the LTE usability in one of these devices, that probably like a lot of you, I thought LTE was stupid in a watch until I used it. So when I'm going down my driveway adventures, or out doing my Rocky IV training montage, chopping wood and chainsawing and weed whacking and billy goating in my yard, it's actually really convenient to be able to turn LTE on the watch, leave the phone in the house. I can still get my notifications, still get calls, and I actually will feel the notifications on my wrist versus having the phone in my pocket. So when I'm out either walking my dog or doing a driveway adventure going down there on my quarter-mile long driveway, it is nice to have the LTE functionality. Or if you're in the gym and you don't want to carry your phone in the gym, I know somebody who smashed their phone with a dumbbell by accident because they had to have the phone with the watch. So the LTE definitely gives you a little more freedom in being able to use functionality to watch, especially with more standalone apps coming more and more available. So you can do your workout, record all your stuff, and still be able to respond to text messages and get them, even take a call if you have to. That really, really is helpful with the LTE. So I'm actually starting to change my mind on how usable that is. So that's basically the major differences in the hardware. And now let's talk about the OS. Okay, now let's talk about the operating systems. So what we got here? We got Android Wear 2.0 and Tizen. Tizen is made by it comes from, I believe, developed by Samsung. It works great on the watch. It's very efficient, very snappy, very quick. It utilizes the hardware that's given to it very well. With that said, 2 major differences between the two: the App Store and what we'll now call S-Turd, or shit voice. So the problem with this is it's not very good. What is the news today?
Unfortunately, that is not supported.
So it's kind of limited, and it's very hit and miss on what is available to do. Yeah, you can open apps with it. It is kind of spotty in it understanding you. It doesn't work as well as the Google Assistant does on the LG. That is by far better. The Google Assistant on this watch is way above S-Turd on this one. So that's enough of that. There's a lot more information on how bad this is out there, else I'm not going to get into the details. The other thing is the App Store for Tizen is kind of limited, especially if you're an Android user that uses Google services. So I am that person. It may not be you. So if you aren't using Google services, maybe as much as I am, or at all, then this device will work pretty well. But another difference is that there are fewer apps on this device that will work standalone as compared to Android Wear 2. So I am not able to download applications directly to the watch from the watch like you can on Android Wear 2, which is kind of nice because you can put an app on the watch and you don't have to have the companion app or corresponding app on your phone. With this, you have to kind of have the app is installed through the phone and then downloaded to the watch via Bluetooth. Spotify can kind of work standalone, but you have to have the premium account for Spotify to actually get the usability as a standalone device. So with the premium account, you can stream music with Spotify via Wi-Fi. If without the premium account, it kind of acts as a remote controller to the phone's Spotify app. Once again, is that a deal breaker? Probably not. But since I use Google Play Music, it's sort of a problem because I have to then just copy files to this, which isn't a big deal really. But if you want to stream the music from Google Play, if you have a large playlist or have a bunch of playlists and you don't feel like dealing with taking files and taking files off, putting files on, you just want to stream it, that will be an issue. So, but Spotify will get you that kind of a service, but you have to have a premium account. And just the number of apps alone is very limiting. There aren't tons of apps. There's some essential things, calendar and different stuff like that. The watch kind of has those built in already. But if that's not a big deal to you, if you're just gonna use the apps that are on the phone, on the watch already, like the contacts, S Health, weather. See, there's crap going crazy on me. The usual stuff, a little altimeter, which is kind of neat. And schedule, world clock. You get the essentials here built in. If that's fine for you, then this device will work fine. But mind you, there's a little less standalone ability compared to Android 2.0. So you do have to have the watch connected to your phone. Far as I've been able to tell using it. So that's basically the biggest difference between Tizen and Android 2.0 is some of the standalone apps, the number of apps, and of course the usability of the Google Assistant. So here's another example. Okay, Google, what is the news today? And as you can tell, Google Assistant works far better than S-Turd. Shit voice, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it S-Turd for now. It is far better. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's actually great. So if you're working out, you can just yell at it, hey, Google, what's my heart rate? Bring up the Google Fit, open it up, check your heart rate, boom, done. Actually, let's try that with the gear. Let's see how that works. What is my heart rate?
Here is your heart rate.
All right, that works on here as well. So there's a little bit of hey, stop it. So there's a little bit of a limiting factor with some of the uses, and it is hit and miss on understanding you. So I was trying to text with it, and I got a lot of jumbled messages out of it. God knows what the hell it was hearing, but those are the two major differences. And at least with this watch, with the LG, if you are an Apple user, you now have the ability to go to the Google Play Store and download all kinds of apps. Oops, I was updating some apps here. Go back there again. So you have the little list of apps here. Let's go to all apps real quick. So basically any app you can download from the watch pretty much will act as standalone. So you have Spotify, which I accidentally clicked, and you have all kinds of stuff. Android Pay, weather, Uber, all kinds of stuff. And pretty much all of these will act as standalone. Not all of them fully support standalone functionality for Android 2.0. Developers are still catching up on that. But for the most part, you can use most of those apps without needing your phone. Hence the LTE functionality now you have with this watch. So those are the major differences in the operating systems. I want to get into using it and setting it up and all that stuff. They're pretty similar in how easy they are to use. They both work great for their intended purpose. They both run great, nice and fluid, each one. And as you've seen probably 100 times in other videos, the Android Wear 2 flies on this device. It works great. So those are the major differences in the operating systems. As far as fitness tracking goes, I found these to be very similar, very comparable. S Health, you need the S Health app for the Samsung stuff. With the LG watch, it uses Google Fit, so you need Google Fit. So, six one half dozen other there. In my opinion, the S Health app, which I can't show, I'm using my phone to record this video. I think it's a little bit better polished than Google Fit currently. So you have a little bit more information. Well, for example, you got this floor count. So if you go up and down stairs a bunch of times, you'll count how many floors you go up and down climbing stairs. You can compete with friends. Your heart rate and count. How many ounces of water glasses you drink of water, how many cups of coffee, ounces, milligrams of coffee you're drinking that day. And the app on the phone actually I think it has a little better GUI than Google Fit does. It's a little more intuitive, a little better to use, a little easier to see data. I'm sure Google Fit will be a little better as time goes on. As far as how they work, there's a little screenshot I mentioned earlier about how well the screens are in the daylight, which work very well. They're very comparable in how they measure GPS distances and step count and calories and all that stuff. They're pretty comparable. Heart rate, they're very comparable as well. I did have a couple of weird readings on the LG, and sometimes you get some weird readings on the Samsung. But for the most part, they do a decent job of being consistent. So, for example, I can see a lot of that data on my watch here on the LG. Oops, I have the wrong one. I have that for an activity. So let's go to Google Fit. Click here. So there's step count for today. I was running up and down my driveway adventures, and I got some measurements of my heart rate. And I have, like I said, we had one reading. Might have been moving the watch around too much, so I didn't get a good contact on my skin. But for the most part, it's fairly consistent how it measures the heart rate. And what you can't see is what I was doing within these. So I was, walking, running, all kinds of stuff. So it will jump up and down my heart rate. But for the most part, you don't have tons of data on the from the watch, but you see the basics. And let's look at the S Health. Let's see, was I able to let's see what we got here. Let me see, here's my steps. Can I see more information? A little bit. How many miles I walked? Let's go back. Let's look at the heart rate and see what that looks like. So yeah, you get a little oddity here, a little bit. That's 177. That's see, what the heck? 177. That's a little odd, but for the most part, it's not too bad. On the phone app, you get a much better readout and data from the screens. So the activity for a recreational person, I think they're more than adequate. If you're a super duper workout kind of person, you probably already have something that's already better than either one of these at tracking fitness, like the Garmin watches, for example, or just a full-fledged fitness tracker. So with that said, these are pretty good if you're gonna take a long bike ride, like 50 miles, or run a marathon. You want to make sure these are both fully charged. There was a video of someone who did basically a marathon with this watch or GPS tracking on, and it basically uses a little bit more than half the battery. And I think this would be used up a little bit more on this watch due to the hardware differences we talked about earlier. So with that said, they're very comparable. The fitness works pretty well, each one. And now, without further ado, let's talk about battery life. Okay, battery life. Well, no big shocker here. The battery on the S3 is better. And as I mentioned before, the differences in the processors really have a lot to do with the difference in the battery life in these two devices. So, the quad core versus dual core, the 28 nanometer die versus the 14 nanometer die, those differences are quite significant enough to have an impact on the battery consumption. So with that said, I did do a battery test video for this device. So I did a similar thing with this one, not as many days, but with the radios off, the always on the screen, always on display off on the Samsung, just Bluetooth connectivity only. 12-hour mark, after 12 hours taken off the charger, each device, the LG would have 66% left. And that's just doing notifications basically only. I didn't do any workouts during that time. I didn't do anything crazy and have LTE on at all. None of that stuff. Just radios off, Bluetooth connected only, just basically doing notifications, replying, checking messages, stuff like that. Checking the weather, regular use, nothing crazy. 12 hours later, 66% left on the LG and roughly 74% left for me on the Samsung. It was a lot better. And you could probably get 2 days. If you wear these, I would say, at night, leaving these asleep, they both are very good on standby. So if you take it off, I don't usually wear my watch to bed. I don't care about tracking my sleep. I don't want to be banging and hitting stuff on my watch. So with that said, if you just throw this on your dresser, the next day you're gonna have minimal drop in battery life. So the Samsung you could probably get 2 days out of. Actually, a lot of people already do. The LG is a little more difficult. I see it's more realistic using the circumstances I just mentioned to get a day and a half, and that's pushing it. 2 days, you're pushing it, but day and a half, not too bad using it that way. But my personal use has been like this. I usually have the radios off. I really don't believe on having things on I don't use. Like, for example, I have Wi-Fi off at work. I don't connect to the Wi-Fi at work, so I shut it off. GPS in the building, I'm not going to use that. I shut it off while I'm at work. And pretty much most of the time until I want to use it. A lot of people are like, well, I should just have it on all the time. Well, my phone can do that. Well, your phone has a ginormous battery in comparison to its size and stuff compared to these things. These things just can't do it. It's unrealistic to expect these devices to behave. Sort of similar to like your smartphone. I think that's what a lot of people are probably comparing the performance to, possibly, or maybe like other watches, fitness trackers that don't have the same sophisticated displays or processors that these do. It's just unrealistic expectation. So with that said, I mean, personally, it's my use is notifications. I will take a walk at work, usually 10 to 20 minutes if I do it once or twice. I will GPS track each one. On this watch, I'll have LTE, so once in a while I'll throw that on for half hour, 45 minutes. So for an example, I did that. Walked around, did two workouts. Well, I tracked one with GPS, and I did the other one by not using GPS, but it did. They both actually. I forgot to mention Google Fit and S Health both automatically track what kind of activity it is, and that so far seems to work fairly well. They both knew that I was walking for that time, and they both can tell if I'm running or not. So with that said, that's the use I did, and I would have 60 to 50% left on this watch. And I couldn't use LTE obviously on this, but I consistently got more battery life percentage on the S3 than I did the LG. So for me, if you do a heavy workout, for example, if you do a heavy workout with GPS tracking and you use LTE, it does use the battery on this watch. And as long as you're in a strong signal area, you're going to be okay. With that in mind, that is not with the expectation of using this as your smartphone or a replacement as your smartphone. That's kind of pushing it in for expectations. For me, this watch operates more like my smartphone does in battery performance. The more I use it, the more it goes down, obviously. So I get a day out of my smartphone, I get a day out of my LG watch. And it's almost, so the more I use, so basically my smartphone, I get home, I usually get 60 to 50% left, just like my watch does. So for me, that's fine. I get a day with this without too much of a problem. That's okay for me. But some people want to get more than a day. Whatever your reason is, that's fine. So the S3 obviously is a better choice for battery life. But with the difference in the OS and how I use the OS personally, this is the better device for me. With the Android Wear and the Google services that I use and the Google Assistant, I'm fine with charging this every day. I usually have more than enough battery life if I'm using it within reason. So if I'm streaming LTE while running for a half an hour, I'm going to have to charge the watch probably after I'm done. You might have similar results to this. You might want to charge it after you're done. This will probably use less battery, it's less processing going on, less cores, blah, blah, blah. But with that said, you have to have your expectations within reality. And in my opinion, the reality is, use these within reason, you'll get plenty of battery use out of them. So a day easy for me with this. I still have roughly 50% left at the end of the day, which is perfect for me. So this is the watch I use every day, and I'll probably be keeping it because I like Android Wear and how it integrates with what I do so much better. So here's my comparison between these two devices. Hopefully this information was helpful for you. And one thing I want to mention is I did drop down my video resolution down to 1080p and 60 frames a second. And if you feel free, please to comment on that. If I should keep it at that rate, I think it is more fluid versus the 4K at 30 frames a second. The detail probably is just as good. I noticed most of the users are looking from the cell phone and their computers. Some people do it from TV, but for the most part, majority of the users, I think this will work out better. So please let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully the information I had in this video was helpful. And once again, this was a long video. Unfortunately, there's no way around doing a long video and still giving you proper information that I believe you need to understand the differences between these two devices. So with that said, CTR, Captain Tech Review, over and out. Thanks for watching.